You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 110, Aborted, presented by discussmetal.com. And if you think Terror Vision is a failed sequel to Videodrome, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe, that is Dan, that is Geoff. We're talking about Aborted.
Oh yeah. I tell you what, it's a good thing that you came up with that intro, because the one that I was going to use, you would have cut it in half a second.
We don't let Geoff write the intro on Discography Discussion.
There's a reason why Geoff never does the intro on the show.
Especially this week.
I think I've done it twice, ever.
And anytime I try to do it one seriously, they're like, you're fucking stupid. Like, be gross and perverted like you normally are.
Can I say this off of the top? Did anybody expect a band called Aborted to be this fucking good?
No.
A band that starts off like old school Cannibal Corpse and turns into a death metal band starring Mashed Potato Mouth. That's right, he's in full force on this one.
I think he sounds fucking great, and I can't even believe it's the same person on every album.
Well, he's the only
only consistent member of this revolving door of dudes.
We're still talking about Mashed Potato Mouth, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who's fantastic, by the way.
Who is the lead singer and always will be forever.
He's the best Mashed Potato Mouth of all time.
He makes Chris Barnes sound like fucking Barry Manilow.
He's not saying anything.
I don't care.
But it's entertaining as hell while he's not saying it.
Because I read what he was supposed to be saying, and
I didn't.
Well, we'll get into that.
Thank God I didn't.
Well, before we start letting Dan engineer the dead, I want to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We're on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher. So if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening, and now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
We love 5-star reviews here on Discography Discussion, and we've got a really nice one for you guys to hear tonight. This is from MG Morgan on Apple Podcast. He says, I've been listening to this podcast for a long time, and this is my new favorite podcast. Well, thank you very much. I cut my teeth on new metal and missed out on a great deal of early metalcore. Discovered some cool new bands from you guys. It was cool to hear someone else know who Living Sacrifice is. Every time I bring them up, no other metalheads have a clue who I'm talking about. The Misery Signals episode was great. I wish more people knew about them as well. Can we please get an Every Time I Die episode, please? Thanks for the great podcast, guys. Sorry for the rambling.
Well, I will say this. They don't know Living Sacrifice. They're not metalheads.
I agree, 100%. And
that's my personal opinion, because they're fucking awesome.
The Every Time I Die episode is happening. I don't know when just yet. I'm going to try not to stretch it out to episode 200, but I'm kind of an asshole like that. It's like the more time somebody asks us to cover a band, I'm like, yeah, that'll be episode 200. We'll try to get it out sometime this year. That's a promise. So we did an episode recently on a band called Thursday.
Ugh.
And I posted something on Facebook to the effect of, listen to me defend one of my favorite bands against my co-hosts.
Oh, shit, you're going to read this one. Okay.
Brian Patton from the As the Story Grows podcast commented, nothing but love for Thursday. To which Geoff responded something along the lines of, like, I'm a big doo-doo head and hate everything.
I did not say that.
To which Brian Patton then responded, it's easily the most emo thing about Thursday, just a dude busting his heart off-key. So I guess in a way that was his way of agreeing with you.
Oh, that he sounds terrible, but it's still emo?
Yes. If you guys like more episodes like that where we cover a band that's not, doesn't sound like fucking Aborted, let us know. We'll do more of those.
Or we could just keep doing episodes about Aborted.
Which I'd be fine with.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to do like a breakdown, we'll talk about one Aborted album every single week. We'll go track by track.
Yes. This Week in Shit, starring Aborted.
I think they would appreciate that.
I know, that's why I said it.
Yeah.
So, Dan, tell me about Aborted.
Aborted is a Belgian death metal band that started sometime in the mid-90s And I know that they named their band Aborted because they thought this will be the first thing that shows up in a CD store in the letter A.
Yeah, AB.
They would show up before Ackercock or Acrecock, which is another band we'll talk about at some point.
How about Anthrax?
It'll come before Anthrax. So, I mean, it was kind of a good strategy, I think. I'm actually having a lot of trouble.
We're actually going to do an Anthrax episode? Is that what you're trying to say?
I mean, you guys are. I'm definitely sick that week. But anytime you guys want to talk about something like Aborted, you just let me know. So Aborted's first album, The Purity of Perversion, kind of a hard album to find.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, I could only find it on YouTube. I couldn't find it on streaming services anywhere. And I almost wonder if it's because of the cover.
Just try to buy the fucker.
As it's got what used to be an attractive blonde woman on the cover that's completely mutilated. Because that was the cool thing to do. Like, you're like, how do we make a visual impact on what our band should be? That's how you do it. You just put a mutilated woman nude on your cover.
You know why she was mutilated, right?
Well, yeah, because she listened to Aborted.
And then something happened. I'm going to leave that one alone.
Okay. We're going to try not to have Geoff bleeped too much on this episode, but who knows? We've definitely got another Cannibal Corpse on our hands here. We have a band that feels the need to only talk about fucked up shit all the time, 24/7. That's the name of the game. Musically, The Purity of Perversion sounds like an old school death metal record for the most part. Actually reminds me a little bit of Carcass's Symphonies of Sickness, but with much better production. I got to give them hands down that they sound really good. Like, they had some really good studios over there in Belgium, and they sounded incredible. One of the things I like about Aborted is that they have a very good sense of melody and a good sense of songwriting. And that's not to say that this shit isn't like brutal as all hell, because it is. But this old school death metal sound on the first record is complemented by some of the coolest bluesy melodic solos, which is something you don't really get. A lot of bands that sound like this are just going to play Cat Strangler solos, and that's going to be it. Aborted, on the other hand, is playing shit that actually makes you feel a little bit. It's almost a little bit emotive, and it's not as much as it's going to be later on. But this is a really good debut. I've definitely heard way worse from other bands.
Yeah, this was probably my least favorite of all their albums, but it's not like it's a piece of shit or something. It's a good intro. It's all right. I would say I'd give it 3 out of 5 stars for the first album. So it's good, but not great.
Well, even Metallica put out Kill 'Em All, which its only real flaw is that it sounds so drastically different from their other material. At the core, this is Aborted, and they are just thrashing forward with their guttural death metal vocals that remind me of old school Cannibal Corpse. I'm happy with it for what it is. I don't think he's actually saying anything, but it's entertaining to listen to.
Well, you don't have to. It's old school death metal. You don't have to.
This is one of those that I don't feel bad about reading liner notes.
You should feel bad.
After what you told me, we want to actually get through an episode without me being beeped 16 times, unlike the Cannibal Corpse.
I can't
episode.
even read these lyrics, or Joe's just going to beep all of it. But I will tell you that, it's funny that you say that you don't think the album's, a piece of shit. Because speaking of shit, Aborted talks about shit.
A lot.
Yeah. Pretty frequently. So I'm just going to ask you, the listener. That's right. I'm going to give you homework. I expect it on my desk tomorrow morning. Go ahead and go on darklyrics.com and read the lyrics to track 8, Gurgling Rotten Feces, and get back to me. I'd be interested to hear what your interpretations as the listener are of a song like that. But musically, it's a banger. And we're going to say that a lot about Aborted as we go through their discography. They're a relatively new band, but the stuff that they put out, they've got an ear for what death metal listeners really want to hear. And I think they deliver that in spades, especially on their second album, Engineering the Dead.
How messed up is it that we say that they're fairly new and they've been around for 2 decades?
Well, we're all old fucks, Geoff, so that's what happens.
Yeah.
Overall, this is a very new band. Their first record came out in 1999, and it sounds like it came out in 1989.
Yeah, the majority of their material came out in the 2000s, so...
Right. No, it's just most of their peers, like Joe said, have been around for a decade plus longer than Aborted has. Metal can be a hard genre to get into as far as as a musician, because it's such it's kind of pigeonholed, I guess you could say. So there's not a huge listenership as compared to say manufactured pop because there's a bunch of dumb fucks.
So like Metallica.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take that.
But I'm glad that they actually got their foot in the door, because this is one of the most pleasant, if you can call it that, week that I had of a discography.
It smells like shit in here.
Yeah, I'm not full of it though. I swear to God, that's just the lyrics that are just literally resonating stench.
Well, I think that Engineering the Dead is an interesting album because it sounds more like Aborted than the Purity of Perversion did. I don't say that album sounded like a different band, but like it basically was.
Yeah, they're starting to find their way. If you told me that, I would be fine with saying that Engineering the Dead is the start of our Aborted.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this album had way better production and went for the throat a lot more. Whereas I think, the Purity of Perversion was just like, well, we listened to a lot of Cannibal Corpse and 6 Feet Under albums, so we want to put out something like that. We want more melody in it. Whereas Engineering the Dead, sounds a little bit more like Aborted. And you actually start hearing a little bit of more of the melodic death metal type riffing on this album, which is not a bad thing at all. And I think it actually enhances the band because Engineering the Dead sounds like an album that came out in the 2000s, whereas the Purity of Perversion, even though it was 1999, sounds like it could have come out anytime between 92 and 97.
Yeah, the other thing, too, that starts on Engineering the Dead is it's not all about the guttural vocals. The dude's got like this great ethereal howl, too. It actually kind of reminds me in spots, even though it's a completely different genre of music. Some of the higher notes that he's hitting remind me of the dude from Cybreed. Because it just sounds otherworldly, and it's in a good way. And I actually really enjoy the fact that he is doing more than just that deep guttural aspect of it. I think it gives a more of a dynamic feel to the music. And this was such an easy week to listen. I know some people are probably going, they end up essentially being death grade. How the fuck can it be easy? I'm like, trust me, it's that good. That's what makes it easy.
For all my guitar player junkies out there, this is the closest thing to an actual Clayman guitar tone I've ever heard, and you all know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but they go for the throat on it, and that's what I like about it is they keep it brutal, they keep it intense, and the vocals are a large part of that. And his screams, what I like about him is they kind of ring a little bit more like early metalcore, which is a turnoff for old school death metal fans. I understand that, but you still have the guttural vocals there too. But I feel like his screams really made the band sound more modern overall. And I think Engineering the Dead is a great metal album. It's so hard this early in the discography to be like, wow, yeah, they're already great.
But they are.
Like, there's no doubt about it. They're still holding to that death metal aesthetic, especially in the lyrics and the blast beats. Like, I think the drumming is still very rooted in old school death metal, but the riffing is starting to kind of expand out a little bit more and be a little bit more in the vein of like more of the melodic death metal stuff, while still being very brutal overall, which I think a lot of bands can't really achieve. You either go full melodic or you go full death grind, and they've somehow captured this perfect mix of the two.
I can't think of anybody else off the top of my head that has done that, or at least done it as well, that makes it memorable like these guys have. I think is it safe to say that we might have found at least for you and me, Dan, the spiritual successor to our enjoyment of Cannibal Corpse is now going to be the enjoyment of Aborted?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think they sound like Cannibal Corpse.
No, I'm just meaning a brutal band that we fucking love to listen to. That's all I mean.
It's definitely the kind of band that, again, not to rehash the Cannibal Corpse episode too much, but it's the kind of band that, like, you throw on when somebody that's not into metal's in your car, and it just kind of leaves that impression of like, oh my God, I'm in a car with a fucking psychopath, and
with skill and taste.
Very much. Yeah, that's true. I mean, this is more so than Cannibal Corpse. Somebody could listen to this and be like, I like the drums, or I like the guitar solos, where you didn't really get that with Cannibal Corpse too much, especially in the early days.
Right.
As far as your lyrical homework goes, definitely go and listen to, or go and read the lyrics to Sphincteral Enthrallment.
Listen to it also. Don't just read it.
Yeah, and you're gonna find out that Aborted has this kind of recurring thing about shit. The dude talks about like eating his own feces, shoving feces up his ass, and holding them in there. And like talking about how like the surgeons will split you open and there's going to be shit all over your insides. And I don't know if this is like, let's just be super brutal, or if it's like this guy actually gets turned on by shit. I don't know which one it is. And I don't care to know.
Yeah, I don't want to know either. I was going to say at one point, this would be me if I was writing lyrics. I'm like, no, this guy even takes it further than I would. I mean, I like a good poop and fart joke probably more than anybody else on the face of the earth.
Yeah, this is beyond that.
This guy like shits in his hand and then use it as lubrication so he can jerk off.
Yeah,
I mean, that's seriously what this guy does.
He pretty much says this much.
Yeah, and that's just like, nope, I'm good.
Yeah, it's different, but like those guitar solos though, right?
Yes.
Like,
and those guttural vocals.
I'm taking the Geoff approach right now, where I'm like, I don't want to know what he's saying because it's gonna fucking hamper the enjoyment of what I'm hearing. And this album sounds a little bit more like, so if I said that The Purity of Perversion sounded like Symphonies of Sickness by Carcass, this album sounds more like Necrotism by Carcass. So it's a little bit more intelligent, it's a little bit better produced, and the overall song structure is better without necessarily taking away from how good the first album was. And another thing I'd like to mention too is this band's extensive use of sound clips.
Yes, and they use them well.
They use them really well. They don't use them so much that you're like, oh my god, every song has to have a fucking clip in it. But it's really great that they have them, and they add a lot to it. It's a lot of shit from like horror movies, and even some stuff I noticed is from like public domain, like medical videos. It's really cool, and definitely enhances the overall feel of the albums.
2003, Whoremageddon.
The saw and the carnage done. Yes!
Literally a perfect album.
You think so?
I
Yes.
think so.
I would argue you'd have to be able to understand what he's saying for it to be perfect, but
How about some perfect drums on this, Joe?
Oh my god, Geoff, why don't you tell us who played drums on this album?
I don't know. Just maybe
Some guy?
Yeah, the greatest drummer ever. That's all.
Chad Kent?
Gene Hoglan?
Nope. 2 strikes.
Morgan Rose?
Nope, you're out.
I'm going to say this just for him. Rob Rivera.
Close, but no cigar. It's a skinny Belgian dude who lives in Cleveland. Dirk Verburen, if I can say his name. A skinny Belgian guy who lives in Cleveland.
You were hit by pitch.
You mean
Dirk
Dirk
Verburen.
from Megadeth?
Yes.
Dirk from Soilwork?
Yes.
Wow.
Dirk from Scarve. So that's
Did
why
he-
there's like blast beats all over the fucking places.
Did he
because-
tour with the band, or did he just record the album?
No, I'm pretty sure he toured. I'm pretty sure he toured
Did
with
you almost
them.
say turd?
Yes, I almost said he toured
It's
with
topical. Okay.
Because he also not only did he do this, but around the same time he actually recorded 2 EPs with him as well.
Okay.
So he was with the band for like 3 years.
Whoremageddon is one of the most brutal albums out there that you could really get, that you could really digest. As I said about some early Sepultura albums, it's like being fucked by riffs.
And the
This-
tone, oh god, the fucking guitar tone.
Oh
on
my
this is
god,
sick.
dude, it's fucking bone crushing.
The only thing I wanted from Engineering the Dead was turn the vocals up a little bit. This one almost turned it up too much.
Way too much. And I'm fine with it.
Yes, it's good.
This album is like full blast, as Geoff mentioned. But oh my god, does it have that melodic sensibility that I was talking about. The guitar solos alone are worth the price of admission on this album.
They're
Not
so
going to
sick.
talk about the fucking Dirk blasts, but, they're everywhere too. This album is what you expect death metal to sound like. Because a lot of the times you get a death metal album, like a band like Cannibal Corpse will put out an album that sounds similar to this, but it's just one sound from beginning to end. This goes all over the place. The sequencing is really good on the album, and they slow it down when they need to slow it down. They go melodic when they need to go melodic. And again, the guitar solos are so fucking good that it just keeps me interested throughout. This was, as I was listening to the discography, this was contender for my favorite album. And it wasn't until 5 or 6 albums later that I was willing to give it up to another album that has a very similar title.
Yeah, you're right. I was the same way. I think this is actually number 3 for me.
Really?
Yep.
But I mean, it's a perfect album, Geoff.
That just tells you how fucking good it gets later in the discography. Because I'm with you. It got me... We're on album 4, and it was... So we got closer to double digits that I really... There might have actually been in the double digits that I was like, okay, this is better. Unbelievably, it's better, but holy cow. I mean, this is still a fantastic album. This is a 5 out of 5 for me.
It's hard to talk about a band like this. I mean, the vocals are so sick. You know, he does a good mixture of the guttural death and the higher pitched shrieks. And this was still pure death metal, though, and I think that's the biggest thing for the old school death metal heads that like hate modern Aborted, is that this was like Whoremageddon, Engineering the Dead, the archaic Abattoir. I don't know how to pronounce some of these names. But,
Abattoir?
Slaughter and,
Geoff beat me to
and
the punch.
Apparatus. You know, like those albums were also like more pure death metal, but like they stuck to their death metal aesthetic here. Whereas when you get later on in their discography, you start to wonder, is this deathcore or is it death metal? But here they were still firmly rooted in death metal, and that's what I liked so much about it. What was cool is the version of Whoremageddon that I have has an excellent cover of Carnal Forge by Carcass on it.
Yeah, I was going to say...
Which is like my all-time favorite Carcass song.
Yeah, it's really, really good.
Oh, my God.
If you're on a streaming service, it's out there. It's going to be like if you're one of those OGs that have the original CD or hell, even vinyl, if you're over in Europe.
If you want to hear us talk more about Carcass, we did an episode on Carcass last year with Scott Mellinger of Zaya. You should check that out.
Did you just fucking say OG in my house?
Yep.
Get out of my studio.
Oh, you're going to love my album of the week. You're definitely going to kick me out after that.
Are you ready for the old Slaughterhouse?
Oh, man, I'm ready.
2003, the archaic Abattoir.
2005.
What did I say?
3.
I'm blind. What do you want from me?
That's why I'm helping you out here, buddy.
Thank you,
He is,
Geoff.
in fact, blind. You can look it up.
I can't.
Oh, shit. So, yeah, this was a great album, too. I don't love it. Like, I'm gonna say probably the same thing about this album that I say about the next album. These are really great. They're extremely heavy, extremely brutal. They basically did Whoremageddon Part 2 and did it really well.
Yeah, as I say, it's not a bad thing, but it's definitely, it's more of the same. And with as prolific as these guys are, it's okay because there's plenty of other albums that switch it up enough. But I'm fine with more of the same because Whoremageddon was great.
It's the Slayer effect. It's like, dude, I really liked what you guys did on Rain and Blood. Do it again.
Okay.
Now, granted, Slayer was all like, no, South of Heaven, fuck you. But Aborted was like, dude, I appreciate that you pay my bills.
Yes.
So I'm going to go ahead and listen to what you have to say on this.
Yeah,
and,
this is when Dirk left the band. This is when he went and joined Soilwork, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, well, that band sounds like fucking pop music compared to this.
Because it pretty much is compared to this.
So good, though. Soilwork is so good. If you want to hear us talk more about Soilwork, you can check out our Soilwork episode that we did.
Yep, we need to do a Scarv episode.
Yeah.
That's some crazy shit.
We did a Scar Symmetry episode.
Yeah, Scarv.
We've talked about a lot of bands, and
Yes.
that's one of my favorite things about these podcasts is seeing the connections between bands we've already covered versus the band we're covering this week. But yeah, the archaic Abattoir
You almost got it, dude.
is a fantastic record. If you like Whoremageddon, you're gonna like it. It's gonna sound very similar. Not a lot of progression here, but I'm kind of okay with it. I'm okay with listening to the Whoremageddon sound for 2 more albums.
I think if you're a fan of this music, you have no problem with this album sounding exactly the same as the previous.
I do like there's a couple of songs on here where they use the layered vocals.
Yeah.
And I really do dig that. That's one of the things that I did want to point out on this album.
He's just so fucking aggressive, man. And that's one thing I love about his vocals is that, like, he is so on point. Like, a lot of bands that sound like this, you notice the vocals take kind of a break because, like, maybe he's tired of touring and screaming like that all the time. But, like, I'm convinced that this dude just sounds like this. Like, he pulls up to McDonald's is all like, I would like a Brent. You know, like, it's just, you know, make sure it's an Egg McMuffin, no cheese. You know?
Yeah, the dude's not fucking around. There's no question about it. That he's consistently been doing what? They have 11 albums out and
10 albums.
10 albums and like countless EPs.
Yeah.
So
he's been doing it for a minute.
Yeah, it's not. He's constantly doing it. That's the impressive thing. It's like you said, you know, it's not like, okay, yeah, I got to take the next 5 years off because I just fucking killed myself on that tour. So I'm going to go do my pop side project. Yeah, see you guys. No, it's just like he's in the groove. He's in the pocket the whole fucking time, and it's just enjoyable to listen to.
Well, and that's what I like about this album is it's like these guys just love death metal. And how many bands like this start off death metal and then a few years later they're like, well, we're not really into death metal so much anymore. Oh, Beth. But like, you know, these guys love what they
they're
do.
Not death originally.
Yeah, but they love what they do. And that's what I can appreciate about them the most is that they love what they do, and they do it with such a precision, with such like a fine-tooth comb. They know what death metal fans want to hear, and they deliver it every time.
Would it be fair to say, if this band was from the United States or Canada instead of Belgium, would we think that this is better than Cannibal Corpse as a common opinion?
I do think it's better than Cannibal Corpse.
Well, I do too. But do we think that that's what's holding it back? Like, everybody's like, no, you know, I don't know
think
who they
so.
are.
Cannibal Corpse has been out for 10 years longer than this band has. It's the reason why Metallica is considered to be one of the greatest metal bands of all time, and in many people's eyes, they are the greatest, even though what they're doing is not new or innovative at all. It's another version of the same thing they've been doing for roughly 25 years.
Well, I'm going to agree with Geoff here because I think that this is more accessible than Cannibal Corpse. You can pick the wrong Cannibal Corpse album to get into. If the first Cannibal Corpse album you hear is Gore Obsessed, or, you know, even like something like Evisceration Plague, which I loved, but you could go away thinking the band's not what they are, or that they can't do what they're capable of. They can. I'm not like downplaying Cannibal Corpse or their influence. Bands like Aborted wouldn't exist without bands like Cannibal Corpse. I think this is more accessible overall because the band is willing to venture into more of like metalcore territory, and they have a sense of melody to their playing that I think attracts the overall metalcore fan or the overall metal fan. And I think that you can't really say that like, oh, this band's not legit or they're not heavy or whatever. So they keep the fanboys happy, but have accessible enough of a sound for anybody to come in and be like, okay, this is great. And I think on any of the albums.
Yeah,
even on Purity of Perversion.
Yeah, I think part of the reason I bring that up, I think these guys are criminally overlooked. That's just a personal opinion. I think that this should, if you're a metalhead, you need to have Aborted in your catalog. I mean, it's as simple as that. These guys are the standard bearers of, you know, death metal, death grind, deathcore, because they've played all three, and they are at the top of their game on pretty much everything they've done. The Purity of Perversion is the only thing that I would say that was good and not great. How many fucking times can you say 9 out of 10 albums are great in a discography?
Not very many times, and we've done a lot of discographies.
Yeah, and I am very, very, very comfortable in saying that 9 out of the 10 albums are great, and the other one's good. That's the fucked up thing. I mean, yeah, I said I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, but shit, for a first album, your first go around, without a ton of support, that's, you know, just trying to claw your way into the genre. That's a pretty good start. We've covered much worse, you know, intros into metal than that. So I'm a huge fan. I'm a straight up fanboy. I'll tell you that right now. And everybody else should be. If you're a metalhead, you should be an Aborted fanboy minus the lyrics.
2007, Slaughter and Apparatus.
Do you guys like the last 2 albums?
Yeah, let's get some more of the same.
Yep, that's what this is.
More of the same.
And this might be the point where people are like, oh, are you guys innovative at all? But again, it's a little different with a band like this because like when a band's all brutal, like Slayer or like Cannibal Corpse, it gets a little monotonous. But why are we here for Aborted? We're here because they play really interesting shit.
Quite literally.
So it's like, am I really that upset that you're playing more interesting shit?
Nope.
I'm not at all. And again, they love shit. I can't, you know.
You're just not going to let that one go,
I can't
are
stop
you?
mentioning that. You know, but yeah, Slaughter and Apparatus was a fucking great record. It sounded not as good. I would say it's like a facsimile of a facsimile. I'm not going to say that it's as good as Whoremageddon.
Because it's not.
It's not, but it is still keeping the fans happy. And I had no problem listening to this. I enjoyed it. In case anybody didn't know, this week's episode was really my first exposure to Aborted. And I picked them to talk about because they had 10 albums out, and I was kind of trying to figure out what I was missing. So I was like, yeah, let's do Aborted. And I can't be any happier with my decision.
Yeah. I've actually, TerrorVision, I listened to quite a bit, but I have to admit, I've been pretty light on the rest of the discography, and man, what a disservice I've done to myself that I hadn't picked it up earlier, because TerrorVision's fucking awesome.
Well, we'll get to that in about
right. I know, but I'm just
11 years.
Right, but you were just saying that this was really your first introduction. TerrorVision was for me, and that's only just a few years ago that came out, I think. Or is that 2 years ago or 1 year? I can't remember.
1 year ago.
Oh, okay. So that's whenever... that's the one thing I do like about Spotify is it actually gives me a new release list. If you go to search and you do Discovery, you can go to metal and new releases, and it actually gives you legitimate metal new releases. So shit like Aborted shows up on there. It's not like, oh look, it's metal and they show you Nickelback. It's not shit like that. It is, they mean business, and I'm like, okay, I can handle this. So if you're somebody who subscribes to Spotify, it's an excellent way to find new music, and that's actually how I found TerrorVision.
That's weird. I didn't know that Spotify was paying us sponsorship money.
No, they're not. But I'm just saying that if you are like me and you like to discover new music, because I used to, back in the day, the only way to really discover it was, make a channel on Pandora and, use their algorithms to get you similar music. But it wasn't necessarily new music. It was just new to your ears. The thing that they do is they actually give you the list of the of what the actual new releases are. Over like the last 5 months.
Well, you hear that,
fantastic.
Spotify, make all checks payable to Daniel Terry.
Fuck you, man.
And,
make them to me.
Slaughter and Apparatus, A Methodical Overture, is a fantastic album. If you're just getting into the band, it's definitely one that you should check out. You're gonna if you start with that album and move backwards, you're gonna find more of the same. For about 3 albums, and that's totally okay as long as you enjoyed what you heard on this record.
Yeah, and it does get better because Whoremageddon's really, really good. That's kind of the it's the shining example of quote-unquote early Aborted.
And I would say that Slaughter and Apparatus is kind of the end of the purely death metal era of Aborted.
Oh, wholeheartedly agree, because we're about ready to change it up big time here.
Yeah, so just 1 year later, in 2008, they put out an album called Strychnine 213. And this one definitely threw me for a loop because there were a couple of minutes where I was like, am I listening to the same band? This record's almost completely melodic death metal. Like, yeah. I hear a lot of shit like In Flames on here, or Dark Tranquility, or At the Gates, or name another melodic death metal band.
I also got a little bit of Slipknot vibe on this album too.
Yeah. They were definitely going more for the mainstream on this album, and I think it was successful. I fucking love the intro to this album. It's just melodic riffs thrown down with a creepy fucking voice talking over it, and the sound clips are still in full effect. It's still Aborted in those aspects, but musically they definitely have more of that Gothenburg sound to them. Like, there were definitely parts where I was like, should I start singing like In Flames choruses? Like, the memory remains alone, reality trapped inside. I was like, but that's one thing that I love about Aborted. This is going to be my most meat-headed statement of the year. No fucking clean vocals.
You know what's funny?
I would have been out if they would have thrown some fucking cleans down on this record.
Really?
Yeah.
What's interesting for me is what would my opinion of Aborted been 2.5 years ago, whenever we first started?
It doesn't sound like fucking Tesseract, so fuck it. Check out our Tesseract episode.
Yep, pretty much. That's would have been it. I'm like, where's my dynamics? Where's my clean singing and my harsh vocals? I want both.
This one time I was listening to Depeche Mode, and it kind of sounded like this.
I definitely take personal responsibility for getting Geoff reacclimated with Death Grind.
And I love it. I mean, it's wild on, like, I try to explain to somebody, like, I was going somewhere with my kids for Scouts, and I was driving, so I got to be dashboard DJ a little bit.
Hey, kids, you want to hear Aborted? That's what could have almost happened to you.
Oh, that's what I fucking put on, man. I'm serious.
I feel terrible. One of my kids is like 10 feet away from me.
I put Retrogore on. That's what I put on.
Nice.
And there was actually a mom in the car with me, and she's like, "You like this?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "I like Ghost." I'm like, "Ah!"
Well, Geoff has successfully failed. I know what I said at talking about these albums in any sort of order.
I know I suck, but yeah, no.
Yeah, you do.
Especially if it's covered in shit.
Wow. Okay, so Strychnine 213 is definitely their, like, quote-unquote sellout album. But it's a stupid thing to say because if you listen to this, most people are going to be like, what the fuck is this? Why doesn't he sing? But I can understand how this was a good introduction to the band. To people that were into metalcore or into deathcore. It's a modernization of the Aborted sound that had to happen in order for us to get albums like Terror Vision or Retrogore, and it was kind of a growing pain. This definitely isn't my favorite Aborted album because I kind of like them to be all brutal all the time, but I definitely appreciated what they did here. To make another comparison to Cannibal Corpse, this is like their gallery of suicide.
Yeah, I would agree.
The album that they wanted to be like, look, we can fucking stretch our legs here.
See, we can play
do something a little different.
Yeah, this is them saying, "See, we can play easy listening music too."
I thought you were going to say emo.
You ready to get in that elevator and relax? Here we go.
To some fucking Aborted. What kind of awesome elevator company plays Aborted in there?
Welcome to Dan Terry's elevator.
Yeah. Once we become the biggest podcast in the world, our fucking tower in New York will play Aborted in the elevators.
Yeah, our studios is like 20 stories under the ground.
Yeah, something like that. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I didn't say it was an elevator going up. Yeah, and you get past floor 666 and it just becomes hell after that. But no, this album I thought was cool though because I liked hearing the different directions that they could go in. But I don't necessarily think all of the directions they went in on this album work for Aborted. But I think they had to find out.
Yeah, and I'm glad that they tried it.
They had to see where the line was. And for me, the only line really was clean vocals. As long as they didn't have cleans on here, I was like, okay, I'm still listening to a fucking badass death metal band.
You know what would be funny is if he'd actually, if he was on the podcast, he'd be going, "But guys, this is my clean vocals. That's what I sound like when I sing."
Anything that's not the guttural grunt is the clean vocals.
Yeah, exactly. But, it's funny. That's the dynamic that I like now. I don't necessarily have to have the dynamic of the clean singing, but I can't have the straight gutturals on some of this stuff. And that's...
and that's why you hate Chris Barnes.
Right. And I think it's part of the reason why I really, really enjoy Aborted is that, his shrieks and stuff like that work really well with the guttural vocals. The death growls, it all works really well together. And it's like they have a brain. They actually think about how they're going to sequence, like Dan said earlier, how they sequence everything and how they put the album together. And that's part of what I've actually really enjoyed. It's not just a bunch of shit slopped together and then let's say, okay, let's try to figure out how let's go from point A to point B. No, it's like, no, we actually have song structure and we're thinking about it and we're going to make this work and it's going to sound good. It's going to be brutal as all fuck still, but it's going to sound good.
2012, Global Flatline.
This was the band being like, hey guys,
everyone died.
You remember when we were like the most brutal fucking band ever?
We still are.
Do you guys want us to be even more brutal?
In the aftermath, there were no survivors.
Yeah, I mean, Global Flatline says it all. This is where they cherry picked what they liked off of what they did on the last album. So Global Flatline takes some deathcore and some metalcore, and it mixes it with that Whoremageddon death metal sound, and it's like the perfect fucking sandwich if your name's Dan Terry. I loved Global Flatline. And I know it sucks because it's like deathcore or whatever, but fuck those people that are going to hate it just for having some breakdowns on it. I don't even care about that at all. I think this was 100% necessary for the band to be modern. It's a 2012 release, so of course it's fucking deathcore. But it's not really. Like, there comes a certain point where like a band like this plays breakdowns, and you can say like, oh, are they deathcore now? Where do you think the fucking death comes from in deathcore?
Death metal.
So it shouldn't be that big of a surprise that a band that put out an album like Whoremageddon is going to put out an album like Global Flatline. Yeah, sure, they borrowed some breakdowns from metalcore. I don't give a fuck. This is brutal as all hell, and I love it.
I was going to say, just because you have breakdowns doesn't mean you're metalcore or you're deathcore.
It does if you're an elitist asshole. Which I am.
I know a guy.
Well, in my opinion, it doesn't. It's just fucking brutal metal that I enjoy. That's all I care about.
I really don't have a lot to say about it. It's more of that good thing that I want to listen to for 30 to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I got nothing to say. I mean, I think it's...
Is it? I guess this is not the one that you were talking about. That's like your shit.
No, that's going to come later. But Global Flatline was definitely a step in the right direction.
Okay,
and I just
agree.
loved how brutal the band went after Strychnine, because Strychnine was kind of a more melodic record, which it's not that I don't love the melody in Aborted, but I do also like the brutality. I'm kind of in this mix of like, I want it to sound like Cannibal Corpse, but I also want to hear some like really banging guitar solos, which unfortunately Cannibal Corpse doesn't always deliver. Right. Although now that they have Eric from Hate Eternal in the band, we might get something like that. You know?
and your Hate Eternal t-shirt right now.
Yeah, I would have actually...
sweet, by the way.
I would have actually said Pat O'Brien in place of that, because Pat O'Brien's fucking great guitar player.
Yes, he is, but
he's having some problems right now, and hopefully it gets better.
You know, the cool thing is they're supporting throughout it. That's family. I mean, one of the things that I enjoy about the metal community in general, whenever somebody's not, except when they're being elitist metal assholes.
I don't know, man. I posted some pretty brutal memes.
Yeah, I know. But we, as fans of metal, we all love it.
Obviously, I want to see Pat O'Brien go get better and go back to Cannibal. You know, like, obviously that's what I want.
Right. I'm just saying that the camaraderie is part of what I enjoy about the metal community. You know, even if you don't like us, you tolerate us. You know, one of those kind of things. You appreciate what we do, even if it's not your jam. Because there's plenty of metal out there.
But Global Flatline is an album that needed to happen after Strychnine, because they needed to reestablish their brutality cred. And the weird thing about Aborted is that it says on like all of their socials that they're a brutal death metal band. And I couldn't disagree with that more, because, like, to me, a brutal death metal band sounds like Suffocation or something like that, where it's just, like, all go for the throat all the time with, like, vocals that are basically just gurgled. And maybe I'm just confusing that with, like, slam death metal. But, like, for me, I don't consider Aborted to be a brutal death metal band necessarily. I think they are brutal, but I think they are all equally, like, accessible. And their songwriting is so off the charts in that I think if you're not even like a hardcore metal fan, you can still appreciate what they're throwing down.
I think the word that you're looking for is dynamic.
They are so dynamic. That used to be my favorite word on this podcast.
That's kind of like the what seals the deal for me. If you're brutal all the time, you're no longer brutal, if that makes any sense. Because it's just more of the same. You kind of have to go in waves a little bit. You got to have, otherwise it's not brutal. You got to have the ebbs and flows to steal a favorite line from my Contortionist episode. That's, to me, is really important. That's the reason. It's the same thing with like a scary movie. Something that's just a gore fest in a scary movie is just that. It's a gore fest.
When are we going to talk about gore fest? We got to get to all these bands, man. This podcast isn't going anywhere for like 10 years.
Yeah.
We need to talk about the Necrotic Manifesto first.
Yeah, we do.
Okay. Now we're starting to get into the modern feel.
Oh yeah, this is modern as fuck. It's like equal parts deathcore, metalcore, and death metal. And in case if you haven't been listening to this podcast, if this is your first episode, you might be shocked to find that I really like metalcore, and I really like deathcore, and I really like death metal.
So this is
like a fucking
having your cake and eat it too.
It's like a hot pocket, but like the good kind, the kind that gets cooked in an oven, not the kind that gets cooked in a microwave.
So calzone.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know.
I mean, goddamn, the Necrotic Manifesto is even better than Global Flatline, which is a little bit more hardcore, a little bit less death metal. This is a little bit more death metal, a little bit less hardcore, and I'm totally okay with it. I love the vocal delivery. I think he is fucking off the charts now.
Yeah,
it's completely
insane.
inhuman. Completely inhuman.
It sounds like he's more animal than he is human.
But like even on this record, they play Gothenburg riffs, but they play them fucking brutal. And like that just blows my mind because I'm like, God, Gothenburg riffs are supposed to make me want to go listen to emo. But not here. It's definitely more of the at the gate style Gothenburg riffing than like the In Flames,
which I'm fine with. This is another 5 out of 5. Shit, I think we've been 5 out of 5 since Engineering the Dead. I mean, this is
I mean they're kicking ass in the sense that like people that are fans of modern metal listen to them, but like I think old school death metal fans are still on board. I could be wrong about that. I mean, old school death metal fan, make sure to send me an email and tell me how fucking wrong I am. Because it's never stopped you before.
Don't worry, we will tell you that you are wrong. And you're just an old curmudgeonly piece of shit that has no vision.
Well, hey, that's what you guys say about me every single week. But I like this. I like this modern Aborted sound.
It's insane.
I think they sound really good here. And, like, they're at the top of their game. I mean, this is the most modern, at least up to this point, sounding Aborted album. And like you pull up a band called Aborted and you listen to their stuff, you're expecting it to sound like 6 Feet Under,
and thank God it doesn't.
Yeah. And so like Necrotic Manifesto is an incredible record, and something I haven't mentioned really, these records aren't short.
No, they're like 45 50 minutes.
Yeah, so it's not like I'm enjoying like some short snippet of greatness, or that like there's songs that I would skip. I didn't skip anything on here. And I love the guitar playing. And what's interesting too is that the soloing is so consistent throughout their career, even though it's been like 6 different guys.
Yeah, the revolving door aspect of the band, I think, is in one of the few instances this might actually help the band, because it's like they're literally having to reinvent themselves and proving themselves over and over again, because it's new guys having to do that.
Well, the modernization,
over
I think, is the biggest deal. Like, you kind of have to have young blood in there in order to tell you what's cool now. It's not cool to play shit like, The Purity of Perversion in 2014. What do kids want to hear? They want to hear breakdowns. They want to fucking dance when they go to shows. You can do that to these albums.
It's a multinational band now. It's not a Belgian band anymore. And I think that's actually helpful whenever you're having new perspectives, and it does change the sound. Like you said, having that new blood in there helps a ton. And it's not just by age. Sometimes it's by geography as well.
Not as much lyrics about shit on this album too. I enjoyed that aspect of it.
Okay, I couldn't tell.
Seems like that was like the first 4 albums or so, and that was it.
So now they talk about piss too.
They talk about like horrible fucking things.
Okay.
Because like I listened to their stuff, or I read their lyrics over time, and I thought like the first 3 or 4 albums are pretty immature overall. But like once you get to like album 5, 6, 7, he's talking about the same immature, perverted shit, but like much more intelligently. Like he's using better words. Like he's got a fucking thesaurus out when he's writing these lyrics. But can we move on to my favorite?
Yes.
2016 Retrogore.
Damn.
I don't know what's retro about it, but
this album is my shit.
It's amazing.
It's not retro. It's fucking modern as all get out. and I'm okay with that. This record is the perfect combination of what we got on Whoremageddon with their more modern sound and production quality. But this band could do no fucking wrong. Like, it's hard to even talk about these. Like, we're talking about 10 albums, and this episode's only going to be like, what, an hour? Something like that. And, like, because it's all good. There's not anything for us to get into a debate about. There's not anything.
Yeah, it's not like Thursday where I'm going to, like, bitch and complain and, whine like the vocals.
Well, we're like, we've said it 100 times. If me and Geoff agree on something, it must be true. And that's how I feel about Retrogore, in that it is a super modern sounding death metal album that will keep old school death metal fans on board, but people that are fans of metalcore, deathcore, or whatever core are going to be totally on board with this, and I'm totally fine with it. I love it.
It's a tie. It's so hard for me to choose. This is definitely, at least if it's not my favorite, if it's not number one, it's like 1A or 1B.
I don't think this is a band you need to make a choice about. If it's all good, it doesn't matter what album you're listening to.
No, but this album is something special.
Why is this one better than anything else? What is this album doing that Whoremageddon was not?
Well, it's got more modern elements than Whoremageddon. I think if you're going to enjoy something like Whoremageddon, you have to be an established death metal fan already. Whereas on Retrogore, if you're a fan of metalcore, you might dig it. If you're a fan of deathcore, you might dig it. If you're a fan of melodic death metal, you might dig it. Whoremageddon is an album that you kind of have to be pretty firmly rooted in, like your Carcass and Cannibal Corpse and stuff like that, to really get behind what they're doing. So I would say the only difference is that, like, it definitely throws back to the Whoremageddon sound, but does it in a much more modern way, and I think that's why it's so cleverly titled Retrogore. In that
it's going back to Whoremageddon.
Like, there's a game I played recently on Steam called Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, which was a game that did its best to convince you that it was an action movie taking place in the 80s.
Okay.
And as cool as that was, it still wasn't that I was actually watching an action movie from the 80s. But it was still extremely enjoyable. And that's how I feel about Retrogore, in that, like, it evokes that same feeling that we had when we're listening to Whoremageddon, but is modernized to the point where new fans can still check it out.
So Retrogore is the Expendables.
Absolutely.
Whoremageddon is the classic 80s action, blow up everything on the screen movie that you watch knowing fully well it's over the top and ridiculous.
Right. Whoremageddon is like Delta Force.
That's a fantastic analogy.
Yeah, and Retrogore is like the Expendables.
Because we were all looking forward to the Expendables because it was an actual movie with actual things occurring on screen that were being filmed by a camera instead of designed on someone's computer.
Well, what I liked about Retrogore, though, was that with modern throwbacks, there's a lot more fan service that goes into it, which at times can actually make the experience more enjoyable than the original experience. Because the original experience was just thrown out there and was like, this is what it is. Whereas with something like Retrogore, there's more attention paid to, like, what did you guys like about Whoremageddon? We're going to go ahead and expand on that in a whole lot of different ways. That Whoremageddon was just like, well, here's the album, here it is. And it's, like I said, it's a perfect album, but I think Retrogore is even better because it's a celebration of that album.
Well, yeah, fan service, the reason why it's called fan service is because you're hitting the pleasure center of the brain.
It's Dan service in this case.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm trying to get at, is that it's already been established that you like something, okay? And then that's why fan service can be so important. If it's done correctly, you're hearkening back to good feelings, and it makes you remember and it makes you enjoy it even more. And that's the reason why, some people like me loved Rogue One for Star Wars, for example. There was a ton of fan service in that movie that made me feel good and enjoy that movie even more, because I had this something new and something old, all in one package. And that's part of the reason that I think Retrogore just hits that sweet spot, because you're getting two things: new good music, but it also harkens back to something that you've already enjoyed, and that's what makes it so great.
That is a more eloquent version of what I was trying to say.
Is it time?
It is time.
2018? Geoff, say it for me.
TerrorVision.
Or TerrorVision, whatever you'd like.
Hail Videodrome. Long live the new flesh.
Dude, this shit is sick. Sick.
I'm a little annoyed
Why?
listening to this album because I started to notice how much of their discography had the same tricks. Most of these albums, especially the most recent 5, all have the 1 minute fade in that the rest of the album does not go back to. And fade ins are annoying to me when they're out of place and they don't make sense. I do expect your album to start with 1 minute of completely unrelated noise.
Most of their albums do.
But what I really want is just give me track 2. I talked about Pistol Whipped having a minute and a half of just noise and then an actual song. This album could have just started with TerrorVision. That's the second real complaint I can have about the band because overall I'm enjoying every minute of it.
That's a good sign if that's the only complaint you have. Most of their albums sound like that. They start with like a... Usually, though, they wrap it into one song. It was weird on TerrorVision how it was just its own track.
I don't mind it. It's kind of like the calm before the storm. It sets it up, and I'm fine with it. And I think that was the tactic that they were going for, was to try to the prelude was to set it up, get you lulled into a sense of security, and then just beat your fucking teeth in when TerrorVision hits.
But I don't need help with that. The time spent before TerrorVision, where I've pressed play and I'm waiting for the song to start, is all the tension I need. And if this is on vinyl, there's a 10 or 15 second needle drop before TerrorVision. I don't need the lead in. I don't think anybody really does. And it's a trope that I look forward to ending in modern death metal.
I don't mind it.
Modern death metal is the best way to describe this album. It's got everything that we love. It's got brutal death metal. It's got melodic death metal. It's got metalcore. It's got deathcore. Yeah, deathcore. I like those breakdowns. Everybody that has a problem with it could fuck right off. I love the way it sounds. These guys are masters, and TerrorVision was the perfect way to end off this discography. It's not very often that I listen to 10 albums by a band in a row that I'm like, oh my god, these are all good, and they all had kind of unique reasons why they were all good. This record just fucking puts it all together in a perfect package. If the band disappeared overnight, we would remember them as a classic band.
Yeah, this is my 1B, or my number 1. This and Retrogore, I mean, talk about ending strong on a discography. Holy shit. This is not what we're used to. We're so used to bands getting contrived or petering out or just getting bored. And that is not the case with Aborted. The further we've gotten into it, the more I've enjoyed it. And that's a rarity in discographies. The fun thing that I did on this time around, I listened to everything backwards. I didn't randomize it. And I kept going after I listened to the 10 albums. I went back and listened to Retrogore and TerrorVision again. And it was just like, good God, this is just fantastic. One of, if not the easiest discography that I've gone through. And it was brutal as fuck the whole time. That's amazing.
Really easier than My Ticket Home?
That was a joke, right?
No, I mean, I'm serious. That was a really easy one for me.
Oh, no, this was the easiest one for me.
I mean, this was my shit. I was so excited when I heard the first record by this band. I was like, literally like, oh my god, this is going to be okay. That's my final thought, by the way. This is all great. When I first heard it, I was like, this is going to be fine. I'm going to enjoy myself. We're going to have a positive episode. This is going to be sugar and rainbows and shit and feces. And that's fine.
Geoff, what about you?
Sugar, rainbow, and feces. Damn, and I'm supposed to follow that up?
Good luck, fucker.
Fucking loved it, man. I don't know what else to say. I mean, I wish that more people would take a page out of Aborted's book and take elements from other genres and kind of mold it into their own style. Because I don't like the whole pigeonholed aspect of bands, and I don't mind them taking multiple elements and then making it their own. And I think they do a really good job at it. The further they've gotten into it, the better they've gotten at doing so. And I think that's part of the mark of a good band is, hearing other elements from different styles of music, or in this case, just different styles of metal, and incorporating it into your sound and making it your own. And I think that Aborted has done that in spades.
Have you ever taken a box of Lucky Charms and asked yourself, what would happen if I took out all the marshmallows, put them in a bowl, poured the milk on, and just ate the marshmallows?
Yeah, I've inflamed. Siren Charms. That's what that cereal's called.
I think that Aborted is that for death metal fans. It is exactly what it is. There is nothing special about it, but if you like death metal, you're going to get that. A lot of it. 10 albums worth up to this point, and you're going to be hard-pressed to find anything that you don't like when you're listening to Aborted. Dan, what's your album of the week?
I don't usually do this. I try to be a cool guy, but it's Retrogore by Aborted.
Geoff, what about you?
All right, I'm going completely the opposite direction, and some
Mr. Cool Guy over here.
Yeah, some old British electronica. The band's called Tinstar, and the album is called The Thrill Kisser. And it's not the country band Tinstar.
Or the Super Nintendo game.
Right, or the movie.
You, sir, don't know the definition of the complete opposite direction. Onesidezero. Is the room getting smaller?
Guess I could have done like Garth Brooks The Dance or some shit like that.
Get out of my house.
One thing that we like here on Discography Discussion is to hear from you guys. Recently, we've gotten a lot of band submissions. We're putting them all on a master list. We want to hear what you guys have to say about the podcast. You can either do that by sending us a review on all of the multiple podcast platforms that we're part of, but you can also send us a message directly on Facebook. You can like our page. You can join the Discography Discussion official group, and we can chat with you. You can also join us on Discord on the Discuss Metal server. We're everywhere. If you guys want to talk to us, we're right here. We'd love to talk to you guys.
And on that note, this has been episode 110 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
Give me your money.
Not everything seems clear. The future's not so bright. The only chance is not to waste your life. Have hope and have no fear. The truth walks by your side.